Well, good morning to all of you, and welcome again. I'm Pastor Jim Beard here. The pronouns are he and him, and we are gathered to learn more about this exciting book of the Bible before us, these gospel lessons. But before we get to that, it's a special day, isn't it? It is Palm Sunday. Palm Sunday, of course, was the triumphant entry into Jerusalem, riding on a donkey, which was a little odd, but the donkey was a symbol too. It's the day when people cheered. They threw their cloaks on the ground, waved these palm branches, it was sort of like a ticker tape parade, welcoming home the victorious ones down the main boulevard. But I wonder if any of you dared to look into our four gospels, since that's what we're doing here, and noting any differences in that triumphal entrance. Well, I'll give you the one glaring one, okay? In particular, whereas you can have Matthew and Mark and even John, who will, record that the crowd is shouting. What did they shout? Hosanna. Hosanna. Does anyone know what that means? It means, please save us. Oh dear. And they're waving these things. And why are they waving these things? Because they're hot? No. Hosanna and the palm branches are symbols. Symbols, you see, of, shall we say, nationalism. A cry for the bold, maybe. Oh dear. Oh, you are really the incendiaries if you are the ones waving these in the Roman's face. Oh yeah. So guess who is not saying anything about palm branches or shouting Hosanna? Jesus. Well, that's a good point. So the one who's trying to reach out to Rome is not sending any messages about possible revolutionary cries going on. So there you go. A little bit more for your trivia of the day. So read those carefully. You're going to find none of these, no hosannas in Luke, but the rest of them name them. Yeah, because we're exploring the Bible here today. It is four witnesses to the truth. We've been taking a closer look, have we not, at each one and how each writer shares good news. Maybe it should be called great news. Maybe it should be not just ho-hum news. This is good news. It's about their faith. It is about their God. It is about their statements of what they believe, along with the history that they observed. And they all spoke strongly, not just to, in a shout, but here we're going to talk to your head, your heart, your mind, your soul. I'm going to touch all these different parts that the audiences are going through. And so this is our sixth and final week. I really enjoyed doing this with all of you. But we've run out of gospels, and maybe I don't need to work twice as much as I'm being paid for, So, but we're going to turn to the Gospel of John. Now, if you think through your New Testament, okay, there's only one other guy here who has attested, has named things in here that attest that he wrote them besides John, and that would be Paul, because he has all those epistles that he wrote. But John comes in second, you see, but this does not automatically mean that John, the son of Zebedee, John, one of the 12 apostles, actually penned them all. Oh dear. No, that's true. It is widely held that more than one writer was involved probably in the production of such writings. And we have from John, the Gospel of John, we have 3 letters from John, 1, 2, and 3, and also we have the book called Revelation from John. probably we're dealing with a school of disciples that grew up around this disciple, this apostle, and it's with a tradition that grew up around his memory and what he kept telling and preaching about. As a matter of fact, none of those works I just named, none of those 5 works claim anywhere directly that they were composed by that apostle. Not saying like, oh, I'm John and I'm writing this. None of them claim that. And yet they are attributed to him either because he had influence, or they wanted the authority of his name to go with them. Consequently, though, we've been looking at all of this going into it, but I'll tell you, location and audience, they're going to be far less distinctive when we get to this one, but we can paint a few things on our backdrop. We do know some things are going on for our last sheet over there. Historically, we know that the synagogue where the Jews worshiped and the budding Christian church were definitely together at first, but now they're starting to split apart more and more, especially near the end of this first century. Each is kind of angrily resisting what the other is saying or doing. John's people have been expelled from synagogues. Get out of here. Reminds me of John Wesley, who preached once and they said, don't come back here. Don't want to hear this. Jesus's memory is being mocked by others. And so John's witness has been described, and I quote, intentionally antagonistic at times towards Jewish tradition and towards Jewish sensitivities. Oh, there's fighting going on. Yeah. There's differences going on. 2 guys are like heading back and forth in their debate. And the split between Christians and Jews is becoming ever more evident, between those who believe and those who don't, those who are to live God this way and others who are not. They said they don't have to. Essentially, John is going to try to write to make sense of it all, to write his good news for those who struggle over who and what to believe within this community of faith. Which brings me to my first illustration. Let's see you understand completely what is going on. Actually, I'm out of range again, aren't I? Okay. So it's like we have 4 groups here. We have one gospel that's like a Granny Smith apple, kind of sour and tart, and it really has a little bite to it. Sometimes I think of Mark as this Granny Smith apple, which is good. And then I think of Matthew is kind of like the classic. This is the classic apple that you put on the teacher's desk, and every little kid, bring the teacher an apple. Doesn't it look like that? It's bright red. It's a delicious one. It's classic. And so we have that one. I think of that one as Matthew, because Matthew was known to be the teacher of the group. So I've got these 2 here. And then we have my favorite. This is Luke. Can you tell? It's a hybrid called a Honeycrisp, developed here in Minnesota. I love this. It's bringing all the best of everything together. It's sort of doing all that. And then we have John. So these are called the Synoptic Gospels because they're all kind of like, they're all fruits. They're all good for you. And John is also a fruit. And John is good for you too. But his apple is more like this one. This is John. The pine apple. Yeah, there you go. Yeah, he's going to be a little different, but he's still good for you. He's still the gospel. He's, I guess, with a stretch, you'd say he's still an apple. But you know, that's what you got when you're saying, why is John different? Well, that's what the synoptic gospels say. These are very similar and alike, even though they're different. John does not quite fit it, which reminds me of that Sesame Street song. But anyway, okay. In John, the cross, it's not like I'm going to tell you this formula or I'm going to give you this equation. It's not about science. As John gets into things, it's more like poetry. Poetry lived out in human flesh. The cross is a divine drama, is another way to look at it. A drama in which God, through Jesus, is revealing the darkness of the human soul and the restlessness, which is the grace and love of God for the human race. It's a sculpture. Oh, all these artistic things. It's like a sculpture that when seen from one angle it's just so horrible, repulsive, you can hardly stand to look at it. But when viewed from another angle, it is so beautiful you can't help falling to your knees in utter amazement. And then again, it's been described as it is a love story that moves you to tears, one that begs to be read again and again. And so I'm going to invite the artistic side of your brains to engage today. And if you have one of those sheets of notes or your other papers, you can draw whatever you like with the markers on your table. If you want to exchange with the table behind you, be sure to ask first. They might want the red too. But, you know, sometimes how do you capture what God is about? Go to the art, not the science, which is what John will do. So why don't you just take 1 minute and draw something on your back of your paper and say, here's my picture of John's gospel so far. Draw your own images of John so far, and you can keep drawing through the whole session here if you like. You know, we with studies here tend to engage our brain, and we sometimes need the other half of our brain to engage as well. So feel free to color, doodle, draw, capture artistically some things that may not be word-based, but you can use them. So there are many things that are distinctive in John and all his good news, but I'm going to give to you all four of note today, okay? And it'll take me the whole time to give you all four. Number one, in John, there is no hiding who Jesus is. What do I mean by that? Well, I mean by in the other Gospels, Jesus's identity and power were sometimes kept secretive. You know, way back here in Mark, it said, but what about you? Jesus asked, who do you say I am? And Peter answered, you're the Messiah. And Jesus warned them not to tell anyone about him. Okay? So in John, though, Jesus seems to have recognized, it seems to be recognized as the Son of God. I mean, right from chapter 1 going forward, from the getting the ministry going, here's what it says. At least it's known to the disciples, and then it starts to spread. But there's John chapter 1. Then Nathanael declared, Rabbi, well, you are the Son of God. You are the King of Israel. And Jesus doesn't say to keep it quiet. He says, you believe because I told you, I saw you under the fig tree? Well, you'll see even greater things than that. And then he added, yeah, very truly, I tell you, you'll see the heaven open and the angels of God ascending and descending on the Son of Man. But he's already starting to claim his identity. We're not even into chapter 2 yet. And away we go. So Jesus appears to be quite open about who he is and publicly proclaim that he is the Christ, the Son of God, and to teach at length concerning his own nature. Who am I? What am I about? And his relationship to the Father, he brings up many times. That was number one. There is no hiding who Jesus is. Number two, as we read John, there are far fewer miracles. Far fewer miracles. There are only 8 miracles are described by John. Now that's in comparison to 20 or so in each of the other 3. 6 of these 8 are not even mentioned by the first 3 Gospels. They don't even mention it. This is why I say I'm so confused. Why are they not talking about the same thing? Why is this here and not there? Well, now we're going to put this all together here. All right. And yeah, 6 of the 8 are not even mentioned. John tells us that he has carefully included the ones that were most important that he told. And he's chosen us these particular miracles because they represent the signs of who he is. A sign is to be understood as like an in-depth meditation about this sign, and it will reveal much more to you about who I am and what I'm doing. So, for example, John chapter 9, Jesus gives sight to a blind man. You may hear that. This is a sign that Jesus, however, is the light of the world. In John 11, flip ahead 2 chapters, Lazarus is raised from the dead, which is another sign. A sign that Jesus is the resurrection and the life. Many signs take a full chapter to explain. Have you noticed that in John? Oh, we're not going very fast. Like Mark was going lickety-split. John will take an entire chapter to explain this one scene because he wants to plumb the depths of what it means with you. These are where you find all those I am identifiers also. I am the bread, I am the gate. All those things are in John. So first, there was no hiding who Jesus is. Secondly, there are far fewer miracles. Thirdly, Jesus is the one in control. Jesus is in control. Oh, yeah, that changes the story a bit too. According to John's witness, Jesus is control from everything, throughout his entire life, especially during his suffering and death. This is his choice. He's not a victim here. This is his choice made in obedience to his Father's will, is how he describes it. He says things like this. Oh, the reason my Father loves me is that I lay down my life only to take it up again. And no one takes it from me. But I lay it down of my own accord. See what I'm saying about who's in control here? They're not in control. They're not the ones pulling the strings. He's the one making the moves. Several weeks ago, we noticed that although our faith acknowledges that Jesus was, remember way back in Mark, it's like he's fully human, fully divine, but Mark sort of leaned a lot towards the fully human part. Remember? That's when we started things out. Much more strongly did Mark talk about his humanity because he was suffering with humanity and feeling everything that they were feeling and going through. John is going to swing more to the other end of that pendulum, the other end of that spectrum, I should say. The divine nature of Jesus is really uplifted and highlighted. Yeah, this is God here, and he is always in control. And with that in mind, okay, who's in control? Let's take a close look at Jesus's arrest. Okay, look at his arrest, and we're going to look at those trial scenes again, paying attention to who's really in control and what's happening and who's pulling the strings here, at least according to John. So I'm going to read this passage to you. It is from John 18. I think there's a slide for that. Maybe. John 18, 1 to 12, Jesus' arrest. And here's what I want you to be thinking about. What details, which of these details is John's telling different from the other Gospels? I trust after doing this for 5 weeks with me, you've got your ears tuned in to one at a time. Don't listen to the whole thing. Just listen to what John is saying, okay? I will read it to you, and then I'm going to give you those 2-3 minutes to talk with your groups and try to come up with four things that are different. What is the pineapple saying that the apple is not? Okay, 4 things you're trying to, and if you don't get them, don't worry. I'll tell you my 4 anyway. Okay, so here we go. Jesus's arrest. And when he had finished praying, Jesus left with his disciples and crossed the Kidron Valley, and on the other side there was a garden, and he and his disciples went into it. Now, Judas, who betrayed him, knew the place because Jesus had often met there with his disciples. So Judas came to the garden, guiding a detachment of soldiers and some officials from the chief priests and the Pharisees. And they were carrying torches, lanterns, and weapons. Jesus, knowing all that was going to happen to him, went out and asked them, "Who is it you want?" "Jesus of Nazareth," they replied. "I am he," Jesus said. And Judas the traitor was standing there with them. And when Jesus said, "I am he," they drew back and fell to the ground. Again he asked them, "Who is it you want?" "Jesus of Nazareth," they said. And Jesus answered, I told you that I am he. If you're looking for me, then let these men go." This happened so that the words he had spoken would be fulfilled. "I have not lost one of those you gave me." And then Simon Peter, who had a sword, drew it, struck the high priest, the servant, cutting off his right ear. The servant's name was Malchus. And Jesus commanded Peter, "Put your sword away. Shall I not drink the cup the Father has given me?" Then the detachment of soldiers with its commander and the Jewish officials arrested Jesus. Okay, you got 3 minutes to try to figure out together at your tables what's different in this account. What's the pineapple saying? Thank you. All right, let's bring it back together again. Let's find out what you have been finding out. What do you think is different? What are you noticing? What's especially in terms of, what was this? Jesus is always in control, might be my hint to you. So what are you noticing out there that's different in this John's account? Yeah.
Judas did not kiss Jesus.
Judas did not kiss Jesus.
Mm-hmm.
That is very true. Oh, yeah. Yeah. I have a note about him. He doesn't touch him. He doesn't identify him with a kiss. Therefore, there's no tragedy of like he's been betrayed in front of everybody. No, because Judas is not in control of this. Jesus is in complete control, and he lets the drama take place. Good. That's an excellent one. What else have you noticed?
That Peter wasn't named in the other gospels as the one who drew the sword. Just one of the crowd, but it doesn't name Peter.
Peter was very much named here.
Right.
There you go. He's in control of naming you out too. Yeah. Go ahead.
Jesus doesn't heal his ear.
The other gospels, he doesn't. But
he's not one of the miracles.
Help refresh my memories. Anyone remember? Was that a Luke thing? Because
I'm thinking it was Mark, but I'm not sure.
You'll see.
I don't think it's Mark.
Well, you'll look that up and compare them. But you're right. He does not heal the ear. Which would you think maybe he would have used in control of things? Let me take a look at the story.
It would display his ability to heal.
Yeah. John leaves that out, though. Interesting. What else are you noticing, if anything?
Well, they named the servant in this one. They did not name the servant in the other that got the ear cut off.
Isn't that interesting?
Actually, they were named.
They did. Right. Which I wonder why.
Make it more personal.
Make it more personal. Even the servant has a name. Let's pay attention to those servants. Here's some more to think about. Very first sentence or two, Jesus does not pray in agony in the Garden of Gethsemane. No. Mark and Matthew told us about similar accounts in which Jesus' soul was overwhelmed with sorrow. Remember all those? I'm overwhelmed with sorrow. Luke's witness goes even further, includes such agony that his sweat was like drops of blood, it said, falling to the ground. There is no sorrow. There is no agonizing prayer in John. All is going according to plan. Jesus is in control. Try this one. Another quick little sentence. Jesus is not the one on his knees. Everyone else is. Who are you? Or Jesus? They all fall to their knees. Yeah, because he's the one in control. He's the one to keep track of. And let's go back to that Peter incident where his impulsive attack. He's chastised for doing it, but it's not to prove, like in Luke, it's not to prove that Christ's followers are no threat to Rome. He's chastised because it's not part of the divine plan. Did you catch that? It's not like, hey, don't do that. The Romans won't like it. No, he says it because put your sword away. Shall I not drink the cup the Father has given me? This is the divine plan. So Peter gets scolded for a different reason. John portrays Jesus acting with like a calm authority, majesty, with dignity. This presence carries through to his trial, which of course we've been looking at also. And so he's going to go before Pilate again. And the whole entire drama is very elaborately staged. I'm using those words intentionally. The artist is coming through again in John, who's almost putting on this drama for you. It'll have 4 acts, I believe it is, outside the fort. There are 4 short dialogues, and then there are 3 acts inside, and this goes back and forth. Like here comes the scenes. And throughout it all, Jesus will talk to Pilate, but he's not talking to him like a prisoner. He's not just keeping his mouth shut like in other ones. Oh, no, he speaks to him like a fellow king would speak to another king. So here's what you're to do. Listen carefully now for these nuances in the trial scene according to John. We don't need to stop and have you list anything, but just have your ears tuned in to, that's not what I heard the other one say. What does this one say? John 18 is where I am. I'm starting at the 33rd verse, and I'm going to be heading all the way into John 19 as I go ahead, but probably not covering every single verse as we go. So starting at the 33rd verse of John 18, Pilate then went back inside the palace, summoned Jesus, and asked him, "Are you the king of the Jews?" "Is that your own idea?" Jesus asked, "or did others talk to you about me?" "Am I a Jew?" Pilate replied. "Your own people and chief priests handed you over to me. What is it you have done?" Jesus said, "My kingdom is not of this world. If it were, my servants would fight to prevent my arrest by the Jewish leaders. But now my kingdom is from another place." "Ah, you are a king then," said Pilate. And Jesus answered, "You say I'm a king. Well, in fact, the reason I was born and came to the world is to testify to the truth. Everyone on the side of truth listens to me." "What is truth?" retorted Pilate. Pause there for a second. What is truth? What is truth? In the 60 years following this scene, going forward to the writing of John, John and his followers have known a great many points of confusion. There's been disappointment, there's been confusion, there's been scandal, there's been the falling destruction of the Holy Temple, there's been danger for many of them, and Jews down the road say that Jesus' story is nonsense, and people are going, well, what's the truth? And the synagogues in the next town over are filled with arguments about what to do. No, that's not what you should do. That's not what he said. But what about this and that? What do you do? Who gets in? Who doesn't get in? What to believe? What is the truth? What is the truth? What is the truth? And the truth is that Jesus is not there to answer it anymore. Jesus has been taken up to heaven. And how are they supposed to know what to do or where to go next? And when he was alive, well, Jesus said that then you'll know the place and where to go and where I'm going. But there was an honest guy out there named Thomas who just blurts it all out. "Lord, we don't know where you are going, so how can we know the way?" And Jesus answered, "I am the way. I am the way and the truth and the life." And here we are, Pilate's asking the exact same question. What is the truth? So in a world full of chaos and confusion and disagreements, where those in the lowest and in the highest stations of society are really quite lost, quite confused. They don't know where to go, what to do. They're arguing about it like crazy. Jesus is the one that you listen to. Jesus is the one. And everyone on the side of truth, love, life, justice, listen to Jesus. And then it goes on, starting in chapter 19. And then Pilate took Jesus, had him flogged, and the soldiers twisted a crown of thorns and put it on his head. And they clothed him in a purple robe and went up to him again and again, saying, "Oh, hail, King of the Jews." And they slapped him in the face. Once more, Pilate came out and said to the Jews gathered there, "Hey, look, I am bringing him out to you to let you know that I find no basis for a charge against him. And when Jesus came out wearing the crown of thorns and the purple robe, Pilate said to them, "Here's the man." And as soon as the chief priests and their officials saw him, they shouted, "Crucify!" Say it with me.
Crucify.
Oh, you gotta have a lot more anger in your voice when you say that. And said,
Crucify.
Yeah, that's serious. That's. I want you to notice the revised order of events in here. Jesus is robed in imperial purple. That is a color just for royalty because it takes so much dye and reds and blues, and only those elite could have purple clothing, of course. And he's crowned, albeit with a crown of thorns. He is crowned. But uniquely in John here, Jesus is brought forth for presentation with to all the people. Look at me. I'm in my robe. I'm in my crown. Maybe he has a scepter in his hand, or whatever they gave him. In none of these other gospels is Jesus ever appeared before the people with such clear, shall we call them, tokens of his majesty. Even though he's kind of a plaything of his Roman, conquerors here, and it's all used for sport, he is still robed out in the regalia of what the king would have. And the scene continues forward with the Jewish leaders now calling for the death of their king. Calling for the death of their king. And Pilate is afraid, it says, and so goes back inside again and questions Jesus privately some more. So starting at verse 9, "Where do you come from?" he asked Jesus. But Jesus gave him no answer. "Do you refuse to speak to me?" Pilate said. "Don't you realize I have power either to free you or to crucify you?" Jesus answered, "You would have no power over me if it were not given to you from above." Pause right there. Remember, we said this was the third part. Jesus is always in control. Perfect example right there. Power, though, is the issue. Power is what is being presented. Who really has the power? Pilate? Not according to Jesus. The chief priests? No, you can try to kill this one named Jesus if you like, but you will never take away Jesus's power. And then, we're getting to the good parts here, folks. I hope you're still with me because the best is still coming right now. And then I would call it the harshest light shines forth from John's pen about those around him. I read it that way, revealing the twisted souls of his antagonists, the ones who think they have all the power, don't they? Oh, listen carefully to this part, starting at verse 11, the back half. "Therefore, the one who handed me over to you is guilty of a greater sin." From then on, Pilate tried to set Jesus free, but the Jewish leaders kept shouting, "If you let this man go, you are no friend of Caesar. Anyone who claims to be a king opposes Caesar." And when Pilate heard this, he brought Jesus out and sat down on the judge's seat at a place known as the Stone Pavement, which in Aramaic is Gabbatha. Yeah, I think that's how it says. And it was the day of preparation of the Passover. And it was about noon. "Here's your king," Pilate said to the Jews. But they shouted, "What?
Take him away! Take him away! Crucify!"
Yeah, shall I crucify your king?" Pilate asks. And they said,
"We have no king but Caesar."
Oh, shout that louder to me.
"We have no king but Caesar."
The chief priests answered, "This of all days." From the lips of the chief priests comes this declaration. This of all days is the day on which those chief priests will celebrate God's kingship in his Passover victory. This of all days, when the priests will go off now and they will slaughter upwards of 30,000 lambs for the people's Passover feasts. This day of all days, they're asked, "Shall I crucify your king?" And in a rebellion against Rome's tyranny, some 35 years down the road from where this is supposedly taking place, yeah, these same priests, when they're storming Jerusalem, are going to cry out in battle, "No king but God." But on this day of all days, the highest religious authorities shout at the top of their lungs, "We have no king but Caesar." The betrayal of God gets no more pointed than this. Who are the blasphemous ones now? Those who have handed me over to you are guilty of a greater sin. Who is guilty of the greater sin? What is the truth? Oh, what a poignant little interchange in so few words. But all of this sets things up for John's symbolic message of salvation. It's beautiful. Here it comes. I'm at John 19, starting at verse 17 through 19, and then I'm going to jump to 31. Here's how it reads. And carrying his own cross, he went out to the place of the skull. Oh, I read that one already. No, called Golgotha. I'm sorry, not Gabba. Yeah, okay. Let me start over again. Carrying his own cross, he went out to the place of the skull, which is in Aramaic is called Golgotha, and there they crucified him, and with him 2 others, one on each side and Jesus in the middle. Pilate had a notice prepared, fashioned it to the cross. It read, "Jesus of Nazareth, the King of the Jews." Now, it was the day of preparation, which we now have heard it noted twice. It was the day of preparation, and the next day was to be a special Sabbath. What a strange place to stop, huh? Let me point out what you may be missing. Whereas in the 3 synoptic gospels, our 3 apple collection here, we notice that in those synoptic gospels, Jesus eats a Passover meal. Sound familiar? Supper. Has a Passover meal with his disciples before he dies. But notice that in John's gospel, he doesn't. The Last Supper is eaten the night before the Passover even begins. Because on this day, the day leading up to Passover, the day of preparation, which we've heard mentioned twice now, this is when everyone goes to the temple to get their lamb for the Passover meal. And in Jerusalem, for this high festival, this would mean, like I said, upwards of 30,000 lambs being slaughtered on this single afternoon. And in John's gospel, this This is the day on which Jesus is crucified. So let's just call it a touch of artistic license, shall we? The dramatic scene in John's gospel has Jesus hanging on the cross, his blood spilling forth, his sacrifice for the sins of the people being ritualized at the exact same time when the lambs are being slaughtered for the Passover. John the Baptist proclaimed it upon first seeing Jesus in the very first chapter of John, and here it is for all to see. Behold, the Lamb of God who takes away the sins of the world. Therefore, in John's telling of his statement of faith, Jesus doesn't eat a Passover meal. Jesus is the Passover meal. What more powerful imagery could John have possibly used to try to convey this? John's gospel is like dramatically forcing his readers to open their eyes and see that there's a new Lamb of God whose blood saves and takes away the sins of the world. Jesus is in control. And here's the fourth and final thing, just to lift up, though there's so many. I tell you, it's hard to sometimes narrow it all down. I just want to stay here for 2 more hours, okay? But let's limit it to 4. What's the key to all this? The key is to believe so that one can have life to the fullest. Life, and the way, the truth, the life, the life of God. The word believe, okay, occurs 85 times in John. That's a lot of times. And the word life is used over 40 times in the Gospel of John. These are inordinately large numbers of times this word is repeated. And when that happens, you know that this term sort of indicates John's intent. John writes to deepen and strengthen the faith of all of his readers. He wants us all he wants to help us back then and even now, I believe, to experience like a new kind of life, a rich life, an abundant life. And by the way, it's here and now. It's not just eternal life is after you have died. No. How do you get this life? It comes from knowing and following the one true God, who is Christ. All it takes is to believe. Believe. You have to believe. You just have to believe. And yet there are some, obviously, in the crowd, a great many who don't believe. And so he's addressing them. And then you get to the end. There's John chapter 20. It starts out this way. Who can guess who's saying these words? Unless I see the nail marks in his hands and put my finger where the nails were, put my hand into his side, I will not believe. Who's that? Thomas. You know where we are. Yeah. He's doubting that Jesus was resurrected. Goes on to say that a week later, his disciples were in the house again, and Thomas was with them, and the door was locked. Though the door was locked, Jesus came and stood among them and said, "Peace be with you." Then he said to Thomas, "Okay, put your finger here and see my hands. Reach out and put your hand in my side." And he ends up by saying, "Stop doubting and believe." And Thomas said to him, "My Lord and my God." And then Jesus told him, "Because you have seen me, you have believed. Blessed are those who have not seen, yet have believed." The climax of this transformation of the people is this doubting Thomas story. He finally comes to faith. He finally comes to let's say, meet the risen Christ. And he cries out his confession, my Lord and my God. I mean, what a blessing it is to know and believe in the living God. A blessing forever and for the here and now. A blessing that you have to believe, because Jesus is not going to show up to every single person throughout the rest of history. I think this is the statement to us. Believe, we're not going to see. So will we believe? Yeah, indeed, facts and records. You keep all the records you want, but they can be quite inadequate to explain the awesome nature of the one who comes to bring us this life of God. You got to have story, you got to have symbol, you got to have meaning. It must be there to capture the depth of what this is all about. We witness things, you don't just say what happens. What does this mean? What does it do for your soul inside? And so you can ask yourself this already. Is your faith stuck? Are you really? I know people like this. I've got to have the proof. The science doesn't say this works this way. But all you're looking at are proofs in science, you're missing it. Missing what does it all mean, you see. This is art along with history. This is statement of faith and belief and trust. I dare say, if you're feeling stuck, pick up John again. Pick up that gospel by that collection of writers there. And let the artist stir that part of you that is the other part of your brain. Move you beyond just the superficial storyline. Get into the layers, the depth, the meaning, the mystical meaning enshrined behind all of these words. Are you feeling lost or adrift, overwhelmed by it happens to us all the time now. A multitude of voices trying to say that they all have the truth. They bombard us with our media constantly. And if you don't know the way forward, spend some time listening to Jesus again. In John, remember, his is the way, his is the truth, his is life. And John, will keep calling us again and again to a revival of our souls. Yeah, it takes believing. I don't mean superficial believing. I mean deep down believing. I'm talking to God and I'm saying the truth. I believe in you, God. Deep down inside, in order to have life, real life, abundant life, here and now and forevermore life, it can be yours. It can be. Believe this testimony from John. Our God did not die. He's not dead on a cross and in a tomb. No. He's alive. Believe it. And you will have life. Take 3 minutes. I then have a few little things to wrap up with you. Okay? But capture for yourself, either in words or in artistic colors, something to take with you today. And we'll wrap this up very shortly. All right, just a few little housekeeping things. Sorry to interrupt your train of thought. I've presented this as a worship service. It usually didn't end here on Palm Sunday. So I have, pieces that I could easily put together for a nice little wrap up, but we're not going to meet on Easter. I'm not going to meet on Easter. Okay, I don't mean And the following week, I am committed myself to preaching at Richfield United Methodist down the road, and I'm not preaching on this. So I'm wondering if any of you would find it worth Christian's time and my time to put this on video, this last part, a kind of a wrap up, putting all the 4 pieces together. Would that be good? And all I'm looking for is like, yeah, we love it. Maybe not. No, probably I won't look at it. I won't take it personally if you do this, don't worry. So let me just see if you say yes or no. Oh, you do? Yeah. Okay. Well, maybe we'll do that.
But would it be another in-person class?
No. Just because I think that would be a good 3 Sundays from now, which I think we're into other things then. So, but that's good. I will also be sending you all who are getting those emails once in a while that here's a follow-up survey. I would just love to hear what you learned, what you took from this, if anything, if you found it valuable. I'll do a little follow-up from that. Yeah.
I wonder if you could take a picture of your wall, because I think that was very helpful.
Okay.
Obviously, you can't read it from afar, but I think that would be really helpful.
Okay.
As part of a wrap up, is just to remind us how important that was in the authorships.
Thank you. That's good. Other suggestions? No, I love it. Yeah.
Has the series been recorded or just put out online?
From Good Sam here?
You're teaching.
It's recorded because we're Zooming it.
So some of us feel like we need to do it all over again.
Yeah. You should be getting an update email from me every week that says, here's your link to. Okay. And there's one link that goes, one goes right to the link to like this particular one. Another one goes to a more general collection, shall we call it. And you can look at any of them there. They should all be there. Yep. Good. Okay, so yeah, we'll see if we can't pull it off, though it is a little busy around here. I'm worried about overworking for Christian, especially. It's like, holy cow. So we'll get the wrap up out there as soon as we can. I'll send you the notice along with a review just to let me know some more things. I appreciate you all. I've really enjoyed teaching and leading this with you. Thank you for your attention and your participation.
Thank you.